Third Element Consulting CEO Dawn Sizer joins this week to talk about a new service desk automation solution from PIA and the tech industry in 2023, plus a special guest interview with Eureka Process founder Alan Edwards and his new book. It's ChannelPro Weekly number 253, Quantum Donut. Hello and welcome to ChannelPro Weekly episode number 253. My name is Matt Whitlock, technology editor, online director, and your host of this fine show for folks out there like you. And when I say you can stand in a mirror, and if you are at your office, the mirror behind you would show people helping other businesses with their technology needs, in short. So if you're a VAR, an IT integrator, a managed services provider, an IT consultant, a system builder, all of those things, there's lots more job kind of roles that you do, lots of acronyms that you probably know. But if that sounds like you, then you are in the right place, and we welcome you one and all. Joining me this week and most weeks is the man of the hour here at ChannelPro, the guy who keeps things rolling right along, executive editor Rich Friedman. Welcome, Rich.
Well, thank you very much, Matt. And I'll just add one potential audience to the list that you reeled out there, which is, the fans, the stands of MSPs and other channel pros. This is the place for the channel pro fan base.
It absolutely is, and we are glad to have them one and all. Rich, how is your week going?
Week's going very well. You and I yesterday had a very busy day, but a wonderful day hosting Channel Pro's first virtual event of the year.
Yeah, different than what we've done before. We kind of changed some things up in terms of how we were doing those, and I think it went pretty well. Rich, what do you think?
No, I thought it went really well. And what Matt's referring to is the tool, so we're streaming all this live content out to our audience through an event platform. But up until now, whenever we do a virtual event, we've always just kind of been streaming from Zoom. We switched to another tool called StreamYard. And the two people who moderate most of the panels at our virtual events are myself and our managing editor, Colleen Fry. And there's just cognitively, there's a lot going on when you're moderating. It's like you're asking questions, you're listening to answers, you're looking for questions from the audience. So it's kind of a thing. There's a lot happening when you're doing that. And Matt announced that we were going to be changing platforms, from Zoom to the StreamYard thing a week before the show. And Colleen and I just about had nervous breakdowns. But at the end of the day, it was great. And we, a very, very minor little stumbles getting used to the new system, but I thought it went great.
Yeah, it had a nice different feel. The way we're doing it now, you can see more people on screen at once, and it was just it had a nice vibe to the show, and it flowed well, and it was a lot of fun. So we're going to be doing that again. So if you haven't if you haven't joined us yet in January for that event, or if you've done virtual events with us in the past, make sure you come on and watch some more virtual events, because we always have new content, and it's going to look and feel a little different. So it'll be a lot of fun. So make sure you do that. Rich, I'm also excited to say, hold on, before we introduce her, she's waiting patiently. I know we'll get to her in a second, but we have yet another event coming up, but it's not a virtual one. We have a live event coming up. Why don't you tell folks about that?
Yeah, it's our first of 8 live events in 2023. It's taking place just about 2 weeks from now, February 1st and 2nd in Dallas, Texas, not too far from DFW. I'm going to be moderating a session about building a truly cloud-first managed services practice, as opposed to cloud being sort of an also-ran. Well, I'll circle back to that in just a moment. We have got Kendra Lee, a wonderful sales and marketing consultant to MSP. She's going to be joining us to do a website makeover workshop. This is going to be a hands-on kind of thing to turn your website into a lead generation machine. You're not going to want to miss that. We have Mike Semmel from Semmel Consulting, a HIPAA and security expert. He's going to be talking about building an incident response plan, handling incident response. A lot of channel pros out there struggle with that, so no one really can help you better than Mike with that. Colleen Fry, who I mentioned before, is going to be moderating a session that we're calling the MSP Automation Bake-Off. We have got 3 PSA and RMM experts who are going to be on stage giving you really specific practical advice on how to automate processes with your tools. And then it's a bake-off, so you and the audience get to decide who has the tastiest advice. And what I was just alluding to, Matt knows this. So, the Cloud First MSP session is inspired very loosely by the TV show Unsolved Mysteries, which means that I'm in the Robert Stack role, basically, on that show. And there are many wonderful things about working for ChannelPro, folks, but one of them is every now and again you find yourself writing an email to your boss, our boss Michael Siggins, asking for budget permission to purchase a trench coat because you need to do Robert Stack cosplay at an event. And it's like 10 minutes later, thumbs up, you bet. So I will not only be moderating that session as Robert Stack, I will be wearing a trench coat doing it.
And Rich, I know how you feel because I have found my way into costumes many times over the years for ChannelPro, and it's one of the things that makes our events kind of fun and different than everyone else, is that we try not to make it too stuffy and too serious. There's lots of that, but you learn a lot of good stuff, but we do try to have a good time and make it fun and fresh for the audience. So make sure if you're anywhere in the Dallas area, I'll put a graphic up on the screen. It's got a QR code. You can hit that. If you're listening, it's channelproforum.com/2023. You can see where all of our events are going to be over the course of the year. Go there, sign up, get ready, because you are not going to want to miss it. And use promo code CP Weekly. That will get you through the gate without having to pay the door fee. So make sure you use that as well. Rich, we're not alone. We got a great guest, one who's been to several of our events in the past. I'm excited that she's here. She's the CEO of Third Element Consulting, and she's a technologist specializing in security training and policy. She also serves as an advisory member with a bunch of different groups. Plus, she's the host of the podcast Rebel Executives. Please welcome Dawn Sizer. Welcome, Dawn.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. I really appreciate you extending the invite.
It's great to have you on. I know this is your first appearance here on ChannelPro Weekly, so you don't know what to expect, but I do know that you're probably going to have a good time, and you're going to have a lot to say on some of the things that we're going to talk about. So for those who are unfamiliar with you, why don't you tell us a little bit more about you, your background, and a little bit more about Third Element Consulting?
Gosh, this is such an always hard question to answer because I never know what people actually want to hear. So let's talk a little bit about the business. Let's go down that road. So I'm in Central PA, which is like the middle of nowhere. We're right next to Amish country, so you can imagine what that's kind of like from the MSP world of things. We've been in business for 17 years. We were local, then we were regional, and now we're national at this point. And we're just, we're hitting that really nice stride of operational maturity where we can see where things are broken, but they're not broken so badly that, every day is miserable. How's that? I mean, I know we've all been at that point. So that's where we're at from the business wise. I've been doing this since the early 90s. We're not going to talk about how long that really is. But my children have both reached over the 21-year age range. So this is not my first rodeo. Let's put it like that. Other than that, like you said, I do a lot of policy writing. I do a lot of security stuff. I do a lot of training, that kind of thing. So from the MSP side of things, we wear a lot of hats just as MSPs, but my passion is in the policy writing, security, compliancy, that kind of thing, and not necessarily in the day-to-day technology anymore.
Well, those are important areas to focus on because that's where a lot of the growth is coming from, is in compliance and security.
It is, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah. So is your, first I have to ask, is your office outfitted with lots of Amish furniture? Given that
you would think so. No, we all have standing desks and things like that, not from the Amish, but yeah, you would think so. We do. Our main office building though was built back in 1810 and used to be a log cabin. So there's that.
Wow, very interesting. So
yeah.
I know before the show we were talking, and you mentioned that you are in a period where you've had a lot of growth. Tell us kind of what spurred that and the trajectory of the company these days.
Yeah, so we were small for a very long time, like 10 years at least. We were just like 3 people, and then we decided one day, hey, it would be fun to grow. What do you think that's going to look like? We're like, I don't know, let's try this out. So and we did, and it went really well. So we went from 3 people to 5 people to 8 to 10 to 12 to 15 very quickly over about a 4 to 5 year period. And it's a whole lot like driving a big bus where the wheels are coming off and the seats really aren't connected, and there's all kinds of problems going on until you figure out exactly what the bus should look like, exactly where the seat should be, exactly which people should be assigned to which seat, and making sure that, the air is in the tires and things like that as you're going. So there was a lot of, core values that had to be defined, and a lot of very specific core processes that needed to be documented and things along those lines, so that everybody in the company is aligned exactly the same way and knows what's going on. And you have to fix a lot of things internally when you're not prepared to grow and you just decide willy-nilly to do so.
So how did that impact the culture? Because I know when you have a core group of people that you've worked with for a very long time, who've been around a long time, and then you start bringing in lots of new people. What were some of the issues that you ran into culture wise, training wise? What were you having to work through?
So we had a big long list of core values, right? And they were great. There was nothing wrong with them. We narrowed them down to three, and that seemed to have both focused in on the culture and defined it completely. And I can't even tell you the amount of difference that that has made. So I think keeping things simple, to the point, direct, is just good for everybody involved. So culture here is one of the fundamental things that defines who we hire. And those core values go right back to culture and how we hire and terminate and things along those lines. Because either you get it, can do the job, and have the capacity to do the job, or you can't. And you're either aligned or you're not.
So what are some of the other challenges that you've been kind of overcoming as you've gone into this kind of more growth mode?
So again, it comes back to those core people, right? We knew how to do all of the things. So as you start growing out and you're creating all these new jobs, you're trying to figure out, okay, well, which hat do I take off and which one is okay to take off and who do I assign that to and who gets the accountability and responsibility for each one of those pieces. I mean, that's a huge, huge challenge, not only to overcome as an owner, to try to figure out like what am I okay with? What should I just delegate because I don't want to do it. I'm not very good at it, right? And those are the things that you should look at first, the things that you're not very good at and you're completely willing to delegate. Goodbye. I don't want to do those things anymore. And then there's the harder ones that I'm really good at this. I really get some amount of enjoyment out of it, but I still need to delegate it because I just don't have the capacity to do it anymore. And those are hard.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to give up things that you like doing, for sure. If you had
Right.
like one piece of advice for anybody who's in the same boat as you, what would be that one thing that you learned that you would absolutely want to tell them?
Um, there's so many really great books out there to read, but pick one that you really like that defines a framework and a process for your business. Read it, learn it, embody it, and run your business that way, and share that with the rest of your people in your organization so that they're all doing it exactly the same way. So it all comes back to process at the end of the day, really.
And I think we're going to have a little bit more to say on that topic a little later on in the show, because we actually have a guest coming on to talk with us who is authored a book about process. Alan Edwards will be on later in the show, so I think we're going to be touching on that topic a little bit more. Dawn, you host you said you're an advisory member with a bunch of different groups. What kind of groups do you work with?
Some of them are channel folks. So a lot of the folks that you guys either do business with or thought about doing business with or see at shows or whatever, we sit on advisory boards for them, but also in local area kinds of things as well. So I'm a Rotarian. So for those of you that are in Rotary International, me too. So that kind of thing. So nonprofit boards, that sort of stuff.
Cool. And you have a podcast. Tell us about that.
So Rebel Executives is all about all the things that we have learned along the way, right? Because we've all learned a gazillion things along the way. Some of it's what to do, some of it's what not to do, some of it's definitely what not to do, things that'll set you back. So it's stories about ways that you can make your business better. And it's not just about MSP. So I have a lot of different groups on there, whether they're, I try to stay away from coaches because they don't always have businesses to follow up with, but a lot of times it's other business owners that do very specific things. So I've had marketing folks on, I've had sales folks on, I've had accountants on, I've actually had my own accountant on, just to talk about things that you need to know from the accounting perspective inside of your business, because that's huge. No, we're not accounting people for the most part. Most of us aren't. So that kind of stuff. We've had lawyers on. We've had a guy that did patents. That was really, truly interesting. Like, if you have a thing, how do you get it patented? What does that look like? When should you do it? Those types of things. So all the things that you ever wanted to know about specific things about any type of business, that's what Revel Executives is all about.
Yeah, very cool. Hopefully we can put a link on our show notes page to link to that podcast. Is that on all the different podcast platforms?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So we'll see if we can hunt that down and put a link to it for our audience to go and check that out. So before we get on to news, though, tell us. I want to learn a little bit more about you. So you obviously you have a great company. You've been doing it for a long time. What do you do for fun? What are some of the hobbies that you like to do?
So my husband and I are getting to that age where our kids are grown. They're pretty much out of the house, and we don't have to hang out so much with the kids. So we bought ourselves a really cool little hot rod last year, and we have date day on Saturday. So that's one of the things that we do for fun, which is it has been a lot of fun to run all over the place and that little thing. But I mean, as far as, other fun stuff, I hang out with my kids. I have two older boys, so they're 21 and 24. So I like to hang out with them. The husband, we do a lot of traveling as as a couple, which is kind of great. Not only that, but I get to work with my husband, which is one of the best things ever, which I'm sure some of you are going, that sounds like the worst thing ever, but it's not. So as far as that goes, those are some of the hobbies that I have. This is like the funniest thing, but I knit and crochet, which is hilarious to see me sitting. Some of you have probably seen me do it sitting around at a conference somewhere. You'll see me like pull some yarn out of a bag and do that. It mentally, it actually helps you thought focus, which is kind of an interesting way of going about it.
So hot rodding
I
and
gotta
knitting.
know about this hot rod though. Wait a minute. What kind of hot rod are we talking about here?
So it's called a Vanderhall. It's actually a three-wheeled, they call it an auto cycle, but it looks like a 1920s race car. So
Very
it's all kinds of
interesting.
fun. Yeah, it is super fun to drive, and it's like 0 to 60 in 4 seconds. So it's terrifyingly fun.
Holy moly. Yeah, that is pretty fast. Crazy. So what's the biggest thing that you've knitted?
Blankets,
Big blankets.
big
And how
blankets.
long does that
Yeah.
take you to do? Because I've seen people who knit and they get really fast when you get good at it.
So I made one for my dad for Christmas, and I think it probably took me, I don't know, like 2 or 3 weeks of, evenings as you're sitting down to watch an episode of something after dinner or whatever. So it takes a while to do, but if you're dedicated to the process, it doesn't take too long.
Very, very interesting. Well, cool stuff. Well, Dawn, thanks so much for coming on. It's really exciting to learn more about you, and we'll learn a little bit more about you in our third segment when we play some kind of game with you. Because Rich, we can probably play 5 questions later because she's never been on, so we can go back to the classic. So, Dawn, we'll tell you about that later when we get to that point
See,
in the show.
this is not what I signed up for. This was not mentioned ahead of time.
Well, you're stuck now, so nothing you can do about it. No, you'll have fun. Trust me. You'll see what that's about later when we get to it. But we got some stuff we're going to talk about. We have one news story that we're going to get to, and we're going to be talking about just kind of the tech industry in 2023 in general. Like I mentioned earlier, we're going to have an interview with Alan Edwards and his book, which is about process. So you're going to learn a lot about process on this episode. Trust me, it's going to be a really fascinating interview. And of course, we'll pepper Dawn with random questions later on, which will be a lot of fun as well. So, Rich, we got one news story going on. It's from Pia. What are they doing?
So, I honestly don't know if we've spoken about Pia on the show before or not. It's a company that we've been tracking and covering at ChannelPro for probably the last 5-6 months or so, something like that. But I'm not sure if we've spoken about them on the show, in part because they've been sort of easing their way into the U.S. market. And the big landmark for Pia this week is that their first product is now officially available for sale to MSPs in the U.S. So who is Pia? Pia is a company founded by an MSP in Australia called the Virtual IT Group. Pretty big company over there, apparently. And we hear a lot of stories like this. They developed a tool originally for their own use, realized this is a product, and they created that product and are selling it through this new company called Pia. It is a robotic process automation tool. There are a lot of different ways that they'll kind of refer to it. An RPA tool, a cognitive digital employee. But basically, they are using a combination of machine learning and natural language processing and advanced algorithms to address a topic that's been a big issue for MSPs for about as long as there have been MSPs, which, everyone understands the key to growth, the key to efficiency, to scalability is productivity. So what can you do to make your techs more productive? Well, the answer, according to PIA, one part of the answer is this new system that they are calling AI Desk. And the AI there obviously alludes to artificial intelligence. And the idea is that this system will help you analyze and route and resolve level 1 and level 2 tickets. So if you have a machine basically that can process some of the really simple kind of tickets, printer setups, password resets, adding a new user, stuff like that. If you can automate those processes, you're going to be faster, more efficient. You're also going to free up time that those techs can apply to more complex, maybe more profitable kinds of activities. According to PIA, if you're using this system, MSPs who do will resolve tickets, those kind of rote tickets, up to 8 times faster. They will improve their ticket closure rates by approximately 400% in their experience. They've got, out of the box, they've got more than 60 integrations in place, IT Glue, Ring Central, Microsoft 365, Teams, Azure Virtual Desktop, and then ticketing systems, PSA systems from ConnectWise, Kaseya, Datto, Halo, ServiceNow. They are working, this is their first product out of the gate, and this is not a very old company, but they've got other stuff coming along here. So first of all, just with respect to AI Desk, they're going to be adding integrations to Pax8 and Ingram Micro, two of the bigger cloud distributors out there. They're working on integrations with some security companies, Barracuda and Fortinet. They also have a whole new product, a second product I know very little about that's in beta testing right now called PIA Canvas. And this system basically, as opposed to just kind of handling the ticket for you, it's supposed to enable you to assign a ticket to somebody with limited technical skills and still get that job done. The tool will assist as opposed to just kind of taking over the activity. And that kind of gets to, and then they have other things they're working on for automating NOCs and security operations centers and firewall management. But, like I said, it's kind of a timeless issue that these folks are addressing, but it is also a timely issue because, as we were talking about on the virtual event yesterday, techs are in very short supply, right? Good techs are in very short supply right now. The last time CompTIA issued its tech industry unemployment figures, they said 1.8% is the unemployment number in the tech industry versus approximately 3.5% for the economy overall. So the tech employees of any kind are hard to find. Technicians for an MSP, very hard to find and to retain. And so anything you can do to sort of take some of that work your techs are doing and assign it to a machine, to a program, is going to be especially beneficial right now. And so there are other companies that do this kind of thing. Roost is a relatively young one, REWST, that I've written about recently for a future issue of the magazine. UiPath, MSP Bots, .ai, I think it's called. So there are other companies in this zone that are trying to use artificial intelligence, automation to not just streamline, but really kind of take some of this work that your overworked techs have to do and just do it for you.
There's a lot here to digest, and we've seen a lot of stories, like you said. We're seeing a lot more about AI, process kind of tools coming into MSPs and being available. Dawn, have you looked at any of these? Are you using any of these kind of AI tools?
So we've actually looked at PIA, and this was back in September, so it's been a little while since we've seen it. So I'm anxious to see what it actually looks like at this point. I think anything that can automate or process a particular thing in a repeatable pattern in the way that we want it to do that frees up my folks, that's a win. I mean, and that's an absolute win. There should still be human eyes on things, because anytime a machine is reading language, there might be something that it misses inside of that ticket or whatever. So there has to be a review process for it. But if it can automate some of that, by all means, let's do it.
And so, Rich, and Dawn, you might know this too. Does this tool that they're kind of introducing, is the customer interacting with the AI to get this done?
Not really. It's literally something that can do the needful inside the ticket, and then essentially close the ticket once it's done.
Okay, interesting. Because I think we're seeing some tools that are like are something that the
like
customer
the chatbot kind of things.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. I am not a huge fan of the chat bot just from the standpoint of, you're interacting with the thing, and I think it all depends on how good the chat bot is, right? Because if it's, I only know the answers to these particular three things, and after that, you're going to have to send an email anyway. Well, then I feel like me as the client has wasted my time talking to a bot because I know what I'm asking for isn't going to be in that list, or I already would have fixed it.
Yeah, you're right. It is very dependent on how good the bot is, but I know that
Right.
there's been a lot of advancements, and some of these bots are getting incredibly detailed and can use natural language and interpret natural language and be more conversational. I think Richard, we have a story last week that we were kind of talking about the threats of some of these bots as well.
Not that I recall. There might have been something up there last week that has slipped my mind.
It was,
But
like we were talking about Chat GPT, and there was some kind of story about that.
oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah, because a security vendor, I think they're called With Secure, just as an experiment, wanted to see if they could use Chat GPT to create really, really great phishing attacks, very efficiently. Answer, yes. And they were so good, basically, that the concern was, email security tools that look for certain clues and signs and tells might be fooled by these, and it was just a little hint of what could be down the road, for us with that. And of course, what's down the road for me with Chat GPT and tools like it is unemployment, because they write better than I do.
That's a scary thing. But so Don, I guess if these systems get good enough that they can interact with your customer in a more natural way, is that something that you think would be it's almost like an extension of your workforce if you go down that path?
I mean, it is. I think it's the superficial interaction, right? The things that don't necessarily matter. The first interaction with an not angry user is fine. It's when you get into a situation where it does matter, and then suddenly you have a bot interacting with somebody, and it can escalate a situation, which that's definitely not something that you want. So I think as long as it's a non-frustrating scenario for someone, I think that's the perfect spot. Like I have a new user to be created, right? Or I need someone added to a group, or a non-frustrating level type of thing. That's the perfect spot for it. Or I have a question to be asked that could be answered in a simplistic manner. I think those are all phenomenal spots for something like that to exist. But when you have somebody that's already at a frustrated level, with whatever a scenario is, that's definitely not where you want an AI to try to step in that could potentially create another issue for you as an MSP, because we have plenty of issues. We don't need that one too.
Yeah, I agree. That makes a lot of sense. So folks, we're gonna put a link to the story in the show notes for episode 253. So go if you're on your phone, you can open up the description area. If you're on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell, hit the like button, and you can open the description area there and go get links to all these stories because there's more detail in here. I want to ask one quick thing though, because Rich, you were talking about this PA Canvas thing, and I was kind of confused by it because you're like, it's a product designed to help employees with limited technical skills resolve tickets. Dawn, do you make it a habit to hire technical people or technicians that don't have technical skills?
No. Um, and to be fair, I mean, if they're looking at it from the standpoint of we're expanding a knowledge base for non-technical people kind of thing, I think that's a completely responsible way of doing it. But if you're taking, I hired Joe from Home Depot, nothing against Home Depot, to run a technical type of thing, but they don't really have the technical background to do it. So here's an AI that helps them. I don't think that that's solving the issue. I think that's perpetuating a problem.
Yeah, Rich, what do you think on that?
So this is a little less shocking to me because I have spoken to MSPs who are either doing this or have said they wish they could do this, and this tends to be smaller companies. But there are certainly people out there who would like for the person who just sort of answers the phones, like the admin or whatever, to be able to maybe handle the really, really simple kind of stuff and just keep it away from the help desk. But if you're concerned about how well that person can do it, and if that person is concerned about how well they can do it, having a tool that will potentially enable them to handle that sort of stuff and give them just enough prompting and tutoring and so on, I could envision the appeal. This said, we've spoken, several of us at ChannelPro have spoken with the PIA folks a bunch of times, since that sort of August, September timeframe. And I've never talked to any of them about Canvas. So I may be misrepresenting their vision for the system. I would be interested to hear what they have to say about it.
Well, if it gets really good, like Don said, like you can start just hiring people from Pizza Hut and Home Depot and, the bagger at your local grocery store, and you've got technical workers. That solves the whole MSP labor shortage right there. It's a big vision. Very, very interesting stuff. Folks, go and check out that article on the site, and you can read a little bit more about some of those things that are coming. Rich, it's kind of a slow news week, though. We don't have any more news to talk about, but I know you got a couple articles linked here in our show sheet that we're going to be talking just about the tech industry. What kind of set up this conversation?
So every year in our January issue, we run a story that we call the Tech Preview story. It's basically our look at the year ahead in the IT industry and the SMB channel. And so that ran recently, just within the last few days. Actually, it went up on our website. It's in our January issue. And the theme, basically, of that article this year, the big picture story about the year ahead, is that, as we all know, there are a lot of reasons to be wary of what lies ahead this year, just from a broad perspective economically. I'll talk a little bit about that for a few moments here. So there are a lot of reasons to be maybe concerned about the health of the economy in 2023. But pretty much universally, with the people I consulted preparing for the story and some of the data I'll cite here in just a moment, that the theme we think at ChannelPro is that the channel is going to kind of defy those odds. It's actually going to be a better year for the channel than it is going to be for the economy as a whole. And those two things are actually related, directly related in a way you'll see. So, we all know that when Reuters and all these organizations go out and poll economists, the last time that I saw Reuters poll economists, the ones they talked to had a 60% chance of recession ahead in the U.S. The Federal Reserve is projecting 0.5% GDP growth. At least it's a positive number, right? So I mean, but the people who are thinking big picture aren't terribly optimistic about 2023 right now, and some of that is bleeding over into IT as well. Gartner just yesterday updated its global IT spending forecast for 2023. They are now expecting global IT spending to grow 2.4%. Again, it's a positive number. That is a much lower number than we have seen in recent years during the pandemic, prior to the pandemic. And just to give you a feel for the bearishness in that projection, as recently as a quarter ago, Gartner was projecting 5.1% growth. So just in the last few months, trends they have seen have caused them to drop their forecast by about half. That said, you start digging into the specifics within the category of IT spending, and spending on software this year, they are saying, will grow 9.3%. Spending on IT services, which is, of course, inclusive of managed services, will grow by 5.5%. So in terms of what the people listening to this podcast, watching this podcast sell, what they do, those portions of the market are actually looking okay. And there is some more evidence to that effect in another study that came out recently. It's from, or was sponsored by, an MSP, a big MSP called Intravision. They actually hired Gartner to do some research for them. And I'll kind of skip ahead to a key number in here. There were some figures in the report that were sort of encouraging, in the sense that the SMBs that they went out and spoke to said, yeah, we've been impacted by economic turbulence, but not all that much. And yeah, we expect we'll be affected a little bit more, but maybe not that much, and it probably won't affect our IT spending. When they when Gartner went out for Intravision and asked SMBs, what areas are you considering increasing investments in 2023? Number one on the list, 65% managed IT services. Number two, 59% cloud computing. So again, in terms of what the people in our audience are doing, it actually looks kind of okay. And as I was sort of hinting at before, in a way, this is not a fluke or a surprise. A lot of the experts I spoke to preparing the story said that when you are in hard economic times, this is when businesses will often, especially the smarter businesses, when they will often double down on their spending on technology as a way of gaining efficiencies, automating, increasing competitiveness. Often a down economy is a good time to be in IT. So we spoke about managed services with someone, for example, and he was saying, if you have concrete ideas to help your customers who are maybe being impacted by the recession that is either happening or we think is going to happen, if you can help them spend less and do more, you are going to be stickier and more valuable to them than you have ever been. In cloud computing, this is a classic way for businesses to get more efficient and streamline processes and so on. And so we saw this actually in 2020. There will be more investment in cloud computing in times of economic uncertainty. And then there will also be more spending, more value for the end users in advice from their MSP about optimizing that IT spend. Are you spending more than you need to be? Are you getting maximum value out of the systems that you have? No one's going to want to be wasteful with money. If you can kind of help them, get more done, but be more efficient in doing it, you're going to be appreciated for that. In terms of security, that it's like the bull market that's going to stay bullish for a long time. I spoke with Jay Farron, a security expert who's spoken at our events before, and in his own unique, direct fashion, what he said about 2023 is ransomware is going to continue and stupid people are going to continue, which is just a colorful way of saying people are going to continue to fall for phishing attacks, even though we're doing more and more security awareness training out there. And so it's going to continue to be a good time to be in security. Interesting quote from Greg Schultz, one of my favorite storage BDR consultants. I went out and spoke with him, and he said there is no such thing as a data recession. And he is absolutely right. Doesn't matter what's going on in the economy, data is just going to keep exploding. IDC expects the global data sphere, as they call it, to grow more than 21% this year, from a little over 101 million petabytes to a little under 123 million petabytes. So there was storage spending will be down, but there's still going to be it's going to be an expanding market, and there's going to be plenty of need for storage. Similar sort of story, though, to what I was talking about with cloud computing. If you can be the channel pro who comes in and helps your customer get smarter and more efficient about their data protection strategy, are we failing to save money maybe by archiving things that can be archived instead of stored in a conventional system? Are we backing up things that never change or that really don't need to be backed up? Another opportunity to serve your customers better by helping them be more efficient. And then quick note about the hardware market. It's interesting to me, at least, how quickly and how dramatically these kinds of things change, because it feels like we've been just talking about dramatic growth in the PC market that went on way longer than anyone expected. And in the last couple of quarters, we've definitely seen the big PC makers report much slower numbers. Long story short, the analysts out there expect that to continue probably through this year and maybe into 2024. But a thing that happened recently that really grabbed my attention is TSMC, the big giant Taiwanese chip maker. They announced their Q4 earnings. It was a good quarter for them, but it was a little bit below the projections that they had set. And on a quarter-over-quarter basis, it was actually down. So there was evidence that their business is slowing. They downgraded their expectations for Q1. And the story behind all of this, they said, basically, is we're seeing weakened end-user demand for chips, and we are seeing inventories get too big. So like after 2 years of talking about supply chain issues and the shortage of chips, and it's just gumming up the entire economic works, we have gotten ourselves to a point apparently where we're heading into a bit of a chip glut that could last again through the end of this year.
Well, a chip glut could end up with lower prices. That might spur demand. So yeah, the hardware market's always very, very difficult to kind of read. So Dawn, there's a lot here to talk about, and I'm sure that we can kind of get your take, because all of these things affect you, and you can kind of see what your customers are doing, how they're spending. You did say that you've been experiencing a lot of growth lately. So as far as 2023 is concerned, what are some of these things that Rich was kind of talking about that you're seeing come to fruition, or are you seeing things a little bit differently from your business?
So I think from the MSP standpoint, sure, we want to look at what the economic forecasting is. We want to look at everything from the economy as far as that goes. But I think too, when you look internally and look at your own clients, right? If you're not looking at them as your own investment portfolio, you should be. So if you treat every one of your clients like your own personal investment portfolio, you kind of have to look at them like, what is their economic outlook look like? Are they a good investment for me? If the value to complexity is not appropriate for that particular client, like I don't get nearly enough value for the complexity of that client, maybe they are not a good investment for you, and you should take a look at whether or not you want to keep investing in that particular part of your portfolio, if you know what I mean. So I think there's economic look at from inside of your business as well, and I think that's a really good way, especially on an economic downturn year. Say, I know I'm only going to have so much staff. How much time do I want to wrap up into things? And where do I want to put the most amount of my effort to make sure that I'm making the money that I need to make, right? So I think first thing you do is look internally, right? Cut what you need to cut. The second piece is, where do I truly want to start investing into new? So you look at net new things. What will make me more money inside of the value clients that I have? Because that's where you're going to, turn up a lot of opportunities, whatever the case is. So, I mean, we're looking at things this year in terms of, asset management and making sure that we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's with everything, and making sure that we are providing that value back. We're looking into workplace, I want to call it process, but that's not really what it is. It's more along the lines of workflow management inside of an industry. So you were talking about that. How do you add value back to a particular client? How can you make them more efficient, right? So if you look at how can I literally make somebody more efficient by upping their workplace process, procedures, that kind of thing, by using the technology that they have, whether it's in 365 and understanding how Power Automate works, or how workflows actually function from piece to piece inside of there. Maybe you're adding in, some type of API connector into their line of business that makes a lot more sense for them. So now you have, potentially eliminated, 10 minutes across 50 people through a day multiple times. That's a lot of time back when you take a look at that. So now you've created efficiency inside of there. And now that you've created efficiency, that's money that they have for other things that they can put into other parts of their business that can, bring additional value back to their business. So I think that's part two. And then part three is, once you have all of that going on, you have happier clients, you have a happier, culture, you have a happier environment in general, then they can introduce you to other people that want to be as happy as they are. And that's how you start growing that business again, right? So you got rid of the things that aren't making you money. You have dumped a ton of effort, energy, and value into the things that do. And in turn, those things then bring you more things that create more value.
I've got to say, I have never heard an MSP, heard a ChannelPro, excuse me, refer to or talk about thinking about their customers as investments in an investment portfolio. And that is such a clarifying way of considering that. I just love that. Because what it calls to mind to me is the
but it's what they are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And yet, like I said, I've been kind of covering this for a long. I've never really heard people talk about it that way, but you're totally, totally right. And what's funny about that in a way is, some of the very same people who will go into their 401k and eliminate this investment because it's really not delivering the kind of returns that they want to see, and they'll replace it with something better, won't maybe get rid of their least profitable clients, the ones that have been bad investments for them. I just love that way of thinking. But I am curious in terms of some of the other stuff you were talking about, because like you said, you are, I'm sure, looking at your clients. What are they going to be experiencing in 2023. Are you doing anything kind of differently as we head into this year and the prospect of a recession? Are you kind of preparing for that possibility in any way?
So we've started talking about that June last year with the clients, like what's it going to look like? How do you think it's going to affect you? We have multiple retail clients in different varieties of things. So for those of you that know me, know my business, that kind of thing, we deal with municipal government, law enforcement. We do a lot of legal. We're in the cannabis market, which is this weird kind of circle of things. But cannabis touches retail, it touches pharmaceutical, it touches healthcare, it touches all kinds of things inside of there. That one doesn't really see any type of downturn. In fact, the worse the economy gets, the better they do, which is kind of weird. Same thing for legal, and as well as like economy goes down, police departments, while their tax base can kind of shrink a little bit, they see more calls. So making them more efficient in their line of business types of things in a downturn is extremely important for them. Again, cannabis market, making them more efficient when you have a downturn, extremely important for them. And then we have a high-end retailer that we do business with as well. Theirs doesn't change all that much. So again, I looked at my portfolio of clients ahead of time and said, okay, these particular ones, there's no way if, they really have the downturn that we're going to have. One, I started talking to them like, I don't know how you're going to survive this. What's your plan? And one of them went, and I'm like, yeah, I don't need you as my client. It's just that simple. Not only that, but they were trying to, rein in all their expenses. They wanted to, it was a healthcare group that wanted to cut out cybersecurity. And I was like, nope, we're done. Nope.
Yeah, I don't think that's a very smart move on their part to get rid of security.
No, me either. So I'm just going to eat my popcorn and watch that burn. So.
Yeah, you're talking about a bus going down the highway. That bus is on fire.
It's on fire, literally. So.
Very interesting. So we're going to move on and get to our interview in a second. But Rich, I want to touch on one thing because we've been kind of following the IoT market, and there is a section here that talks about Internet of Things and some of the growth that's been happening there. And I just want to get Dawn's take. Are you seeing a lot more IoT in the customers that you're kind of servicing, and are you finding that to be a lucrative market for you?
So it depends, right? And then that's like the quintessential comment from any type of consultant. It depends. The cannabis market has so much IoT into there. So it's everything from, we need to make sure that we track from seed to sale, right? To, humidification types of things. And there's all kinds of IoT pieces inside of there. So are we handling that? Nope. They actually have a separate company that does that kind of stuff. I don't need that in my nightmare of Internet of Things. Thank you very much. But things along the lines of HVAC systems, electrical systems, those types of things, those we see a good bit of. And as long as we can manage them and, keep them under management, we're good to go with that. The ones that I worry about are the things that have been put in that no one knows about that suddenly are showing up on, some network piece somewhere, and then all of a sudden, okay, well, we're VLANing that off, so it's not touching any of our things, making sure that, if you have that, wacky thermostat somewhere that I don't really care about, I don't need to manage it, it's off on its own little island somewhere.
So even though another company in this case is doing the IoT work, you're still kind of responsible at least for some of the networking aspect of it, and
the networking, absolutely, yeah,
but not the security aspect.
So we just VLAN that away, and that's somebody else's problem.
And don't look.
Just don't touch my stuff. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, very interesting. Do you think was that a bit side of their business that you think you'd want to look at doing more of the IoT work, or you think that's just not your wheelhouse?
I don't know. It's kind of a weird scenario that everybody has their niche, right? And so far, that has not been our niche, things that we really want to get into. We've kind of stayed in our lane over here. Can we do it? Sure. Do we want to? I don't know. I don't know. Nothing out there has been so interesting that we're like, oh, that thing we want. Everything else has kind of been like, oh, you plug it in, it just kind of does a thing. And there's no real security around it. And it's not a great device or whatever. That's not where our expertise lies. I mean, if you want to talk about license plate readers and smart city devices and things along, Yes, that is something that we do, and we get into that kind of stuff. That kind of stuff is fun, but I would consider those more network appliances, server-based applications, that kind of stuff. And I wouldn't consider that IoT, though it technically is.
Yeah, IoT is a very broad term that can mean a
It,
lot
it
of different
is.
things. Yeah,
It is. So when I think IoT, I think of things that are smaller than my hand that do one particular thing and aren't particularly smart devices.
interesting. So that's your
But
definition.
that's my
Yeah.
definition, right?
Okay, very interesting. Yeah, because I know that's an area lots of MSPs are having to deal with, and in some cases struggle with. So it's interesting to get your take on how you're doing that. Last bit of thing, since you are a technologist, you'll probably appreciate this. When Rich talks about storage and global storage numbers, my mind just it's like crazy. So, Rich, you said in 2023 the global data sphere will expand to 122 million, almost 123 million petabytes. That is an enormous amount of data. That's crazy. How many
But
hard
it's
drives is that?
but it's not when you think about it. I mean, imagine just imagine in your town, right? How many police officers do you have, right? Maybe it's 60, maybe it's 70, whatever it is. So maybe it's a mid-sized department, that kind of thing. Every single one of them has a body cam on and it's recording for their entire shift. As soon as they get in their car, it starts recording their car footage, right? So that's two different sets of footage, which we all know if we make a video is a little larger than, your average Word doc. So that's a lot of video just from one guy's shift. Now multiply that over how many through a 2 or 3 shift day times how many towns are there in the United States. If you're just talking about video footage, it's a lot. And now you talk about, what about security systems in that building and the building next door and the building next door to that? That's a lot more video storage. And then you have, just the standard application storage. And then you have, database storage. And then you have, so yeah, it's a lot. And then, TikTok videos. We all want to see the cats dancing on TikTok, right?
Yeah, I would actually be very curious to see what percentage of the global data footprint is video. I bet it's a pretty high percentage, given that that's usually the largest files, and then that also leads to why we need to have better compression formats for video. But the global data sphere will never shrink. But do you think it'll ever get completely out of hand, or do you think we will always be able to scale storage to meet that need?
Me personally, I think
Yeah,
we
just your
will be
opinion.
able. I'm hoping for Star Trek, right? We're storing everything on crystals eventually. So,
This one
and
crystal stores 8 trillion petabytes. Yeah.
right. So, I mean, will we figure out new ways to store data? Absolutely. Will we ever run out of space? No, I think that whole invention is a necessity, right? So we will keep inventing things to store our silly videos on until we run out of silly videos to make.
Interesting. Okay, cool stuff. Side discussion that I just wanted to get your take on, because I always find those data points very interesting and fascinating. But we do need to move on. We are going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to be joined by Alan Edwards, and we're going to be talking about his new book. Don will be with us on the other side. So we're going to talk about process and all kinds of stuff. It's going to be a great interview. You're not going to want to miss it. Stick around. We will be right back. And welcome back to part 2 of this episode of ChannelPro Weekly. Got a really, really interesting interview guest lined up today. Very excited to finally have him on. So if you're looking to accelerate your business by reducing cultural problems and increasing consistently positive results, even when you're not there, then our guest is someone you may want to know, who has a new book out called Process and the Other P Word. Please welcome Alan Edwards of Eureka Process. Welcome, Alan.
Thanks for having me. Glad to have made it today.
Yeah, I remember at one of our shows last year, we were talking about when the book was kind of coming out, about getting you on, and finally the day has arrived. You are here, but this is also a very exciting week for you. So why don't you tell us your exciting news this week before we get too far into the book?
Sure. Yeah, I just got married on Monday, and we met in Cozumel, Mexico 5 years ago to the day we got married this Monday, January 16th. So we were here honeymooning, and I heard an exciting opportunity to be in this podcast, and it was Liesl, my wife, was like, "Yes, please go do that." She might be tired of me already. I don't know.
Well, congratulations. Now, did you have a lot of friends and family come down and join you for this, or was it
surprisingly,
very small?
given the distance, we had 50 people come, and it's been a lot, and we still have a few folks in town, and just been entertaining each other and enjoying company.
Very, very neat. Now I also kind of got married in a remotely too, but we were still docked in the United States when we were married. So our marriage was like actually like legal in the US. Do you have to like, do you still have to file like a civil marriage suit in a court when you get home, or is that already done, or how did that work?
My casual side to give you the answer is you worry too much. Uh, but technically, we were common law married years ago in Canada, which is also how I was able to immigrate to Canada. So we just made it official, gave people a reason to come party.
Hey, that sounds like a win. So very cool. Well, congratulations. So Dawn Sizer still here with us, here in part 2. So I'm sure we'll be hearing from her. But Alan, take a few minutes, tell us a little bit more about you and a little bit more about your background.
Sure. I was born wet, naked, unable to walk or talk. I did overcome most of those obstacles to start an IT business in '02 before folks like Carl Palachuk taught me what an MSP was. Those and the folks at ConnectWise and others at the time. Sold my business in 2011. Worked as a employee manager for a few years after that, a couple of MSPs. Before I was called back about 5 years ago, and I realized that I was being asked the same questions and I was giving the same answers, and it all involved process and people. So I formed a Eureka Process to commoditize that information and get it to as many people as possible.
Very cool. So were you actually born with a copy of one of Carl Palachuk's books, or how did that?
I'm not quite that young. I just
awesome.
look that young.
Awesome stuff. Well, glad to be here. So what we're here to talk about is your book. I got a copy of it here myself. It might be kind of reversed, but it's called Process and the Other P Words. So what inspired you to go ahead and write this book and get some of this stuff down on paper?
I tease my first client. He takes all of my advice, but only a year later when somebody else tells it to him. And he's still a client, so it must be working for them. But he chose, when you listen to somebody's advice, says, yeah, but they wrote the book. I was like, well, I'm going to write the book. And when he said that, he wasn't literally meaning published author. What he meant was the time and effort that goes into making a book and making it succinct and put together ends up with a better product. And I found that to be true. I started writing a much larger book about our entire process. It was long and unwieldy and actually caused me to change my entire business because I had to make things more structured, the type of structure that came from the thought behind writing a book. And then that was so overwhelmingly long. It took 4 years to write it. And you really only have the preview in that book you have in front of you today with what I want to do. But now at least that part's very well thought out and put together.
So first, just an observation and confirm if this is correct or not. But if I remember right, you actually launched your company in Cozumel as well. So you not only started this business, you met your future wife. It's actually kind of an important place for you, isn't it?
It is. It's a important place, important date. This is a whole other podcast for you. But my wife met me broken, homeless. Despite having sold my company, I went through some personal stuff, divorce and everything, and I wound up in Cozumel, broken, homeless. One of the few places you can do that at and still survive well. And then a week after meeting her, I was introduced to my first client through some contacts I'd been working on. And it blossomed from there because they too were asking the same questions with the same answers. And that was kind of my epiphany moment.
So let's go back in time a little bit. Process is in the name of your company. The book is all about process. When you were a very successful MSP, what role did process play in that success? What kind of turned you on to the power of process?
I mean, certainly a fair amount of trial and error. But even in my MSP, even though we were very small, there was a month that I took a vacation and no one ever needed me. And that was just with 5 people. And I've always dreamed about that because no one wants to be stuck in if you ever any friends that own a retail company, they call it retail jail. I don't want to have to work the rest of my life. I'm working for a purpose. And some lifestyles are to work, generate income, excessive income, to invest for retirement. And I believe that my current business should be that investment. And it's not just about the exit strategy, but I always aim for passive income. And you can't do that without a machine printing cash for you.
even in your MSP day, this comes up in the book just as an illustration of how rigorous about process you became over time. There's something in there where you mentioned that basically level 1 techs were not allowed to resolve a ticket unless there was a standard operating process for that particular issue there. If there was not a process for them to follow, they were supposed to document what's going wrong and escalate immediately, because you didn't want somebody at that level operating without a process. I mean, talk about that mindset and how that kind of helped the business run as efficiently as you just described.
Sure. It's the classic, let's call it the McDonald's mentality, right? The lowest wage person to produce the most work and do it in a skillful way. And so as you get bigger and you have more tickets, you begin to be able to afford a full-time tier 1 position to do the work. And people are always like, well, how do you trust them to do that? Or how do you get good work out of it? And my solution to that was, find them repeatable processes they can follow. So eventually, you write technical SOPs. In our PSA, we would actually have those SOPs automated. So when you categorize a ticket correctly, it put the SOP there. They follow the SOP, and once they do, they either resolve or escalate. And then you start measuring your escalation rates. How do we get those down? Well, now your tier 2s and your tier 3s are incentivized. Like, I don't want this BS ticket. Let me write down how to solve this for others. And it just became the easiest way. And anybody who's ever tried to hire a top tier technician, it's difficult, right? They want a high paycheck and they're an unproven quantity. And it's really hard to justify that versus hiring a tier 1 and working up. So you build that tier 3 farm, hire at tier 1, and train them up. And I know a lot of MSPs these days have been pretty successful at building those types of tier 3 farms.
So you were very rigorous about process, but you get a lot of the same kind of questions from people these days. In your experience, how rigorous about process, how appropriately focused on process is the typical MSP?
It depends, which is the classic consultant answer, of course. The good news is maybe it's because my sample size are those who are contacting me or interested in what I have to say. I think most people understand the importance. They just have a little more difficulty getting it to the top level of consciousness where they actually make it happen. Like even, the second pitfall after process is the managing to it. People have difficulty wanting to sharpen the saw when they'd rather be busy chopping trees.
So from the MSP aspect, I mean, where do we start? There's got to be a starting point, right? Is there a good place where we can say, this is the process that I should write down today? And then what's the next one? I mean, like, are there a top 5 and how detailed do we have to get? And that's a lot of questions, and I'm sorry.
I like it because I can say whatever I want and call it an answer.
Sweet.
The first process I recommend is cheekily named the process, which is far better than procedure when I first made it. But you should have a plan. Like, write down, how do we write processes? Where do we store them? Who's in charge and those types of things? Because what typically happens is people start writing on everything, storing them everywhere, and then it's unusable. So I write down that blueprint first, and that is mostly what the book is about, is getting that piece started. Another little cautionary tale, honestly, if you're 3 or 4 people and not trying to grow fast, I feel like your need for processes are minimal. Just do the big stuff or the stuff that you actually forget you to come back to, because processes have an ROI based on the number of people following them. So that ROI takes a lot longer at 3 or 4 people versus when you're at 10, 20, 50 people. And my 5 is the line in the sand. If you're at 5, you better have processes. If you're before 4 or 5, you better start thinking about processes. And then as far as level of detail, less is more to an extent. I use the necessary and sufficient test. What is the bare minimum you have to have? You want the minimum, because the more details you include, next thing you know, Windows updates from 10 to 11, let's say. And frankly, from an outsider's perspective, the upgrade from 10 to 11 is pretty minimal. But some stuff moved around. And if you had every little word detailed and every little screenshot, it would be useless. But if you still said, hey, find control panel, find the internet app, Well, that level of detail has survived for 5 versions of Windows. And some of that can also be from know your audience. Are you writing this for the public? Are you writing it for a technician that you have trained? There's a big difference. One more example, always, always, always separate training from SOPs and procedures. If you're using a PSA, don't teach them how to use the PSA in your SOP. Teach them how you use the SOP for this task. Assume, because you have to, that training has been done somewhere else in the past. And
so,
that's all
Don was asking about, like, where do you get started? And there's actually a good example in the book. There's a chapter, I believe, called Your Most Important Process. So is that like what is that? Tell folks what that is and why it's the most important one. Is that a good place to get started?
Yeah, so we actually have your first process, which is the process, the blueprint to your process life. And then the second most important one is in MSP is how to work tickets, right? It's kind of all encompassing. And I usually even start with the diagram. You would be amazed if you went to every one of your technicians, every one of your managers and say, hey, draw me a diagram of how tickets flow, or describe to me, or look at this diagram. They would disagree, and they would be pretty darn passionate about it. They all think they're right. And that's the interesting thing about process is no one in your company is screwing up intentionally, right? They just don't have clear expectations about what you would like to happen. And that's what the most important one does, which is your working tickets diagram. It'll include your statuses, your dispatch SOPs. It links a lot of other stuff. But just having that laid out, new flows to maybe assigned, maybe scheduled, that flows to in progress flows to completed, or maybe waiting client, waiting vendor. Those types of little things, you'd be surprised. Writing it down, getting people in agreement on it makes all the difference in the world.
So handling tickets, it's a process that MSPs may or may not, or a task that MSPs may or may not have a process around right now. But I imagine most people listening to or watching the podcast right now understand intuitively, if I was doing that in a standardized way, that would probably be more efficient. Are there processes or tasks that an MSP does that people don't even think about systematizing with a process and maybe should?
This is where I'm jaded because I just naturally think that way. I think the answer is anything repeatable. I mean, that's the carte blanche answer. Even in my early days when it was just me, I still limited the number of processes I wrote because of the ROI. But like invoicing, I did it once a month. There were several steps and several screens, and I would forget the order. I'd figure it out. I'm a smart guy. I've done it before, right? But I wrote a process just to make sure that I could follow it step by step, click by click, and be done with it the first time in the shortest amount of time possible. I will say as you mature, always the hardest processes to write are department handoffs. Sales to technical to finance. That's usually where you have to have you had the most struggle, the most handoffs, the most change in systems.
So
go
ahead, Don.
We all want to talk about that one, apparently. We're in the process right now of the handoff from marketing to sales, and it is very broken. So I understand that comment deeply.
Yeah. I mean, you're already ahead of most folks because you have marketing different than sales.
Yeah, and what we have found is that it's very broken. The process is broken. The tools are broken. There's no good way at the moment. So we're actually refining that entire process and figuring out how that actually works. So there's a very different commodity, I want to call it, going from I can write a technical SOP to do a repeatable process for somebody than the business process aspect of doing a thing that may change based on how something looks or feels or whatever in the process of that particular action, right? It's just a whole different ball of wax, quite frankly.
And while I do not address this part in the book, what I find the magic sauce in there is you have to understand which details matter. For example, if there's a trigger in your CRM that causes something to happen in your ticketing system, okay, that has to happen that way every time. But everywhere else, I try to zoom out and remind people of their purpose. Some of the details don't matter. I mean, I jokingly with tech say, look, I don't care if you follow the process or not, as long as I can't tell. Now, hopefully our processes are such a way that everything I put in there does matter. Therefore, I can tell if they're not being followed. And, oh gosh, don't shoot me. If timesheets are due by Monday at 10 a.m., and as your manager, I didn't get to it till 10:30 and you got in at 10:20, I'm not going to say a word, right? I'm not here to be a process czar of any kind. We just need things to function smoothly for everybody and that achieve the purpose. So I'm fine. So do keep in mind there's times to zoom out for purpose and passion instead of just the details.
So Don, it sounds like that you've done some of this work in your company to kind of process some things or figure out some of these details. How much thought have you put into it? Do you have processes for your technicians, for example? Do you have these kinds of details, or are you just now starting down that path?
So, I mean, everything's refinement, right? We've had processes, procedures for years. I mean, we've been at this for 16, 17 years at this point. It feels like forever some days, but so you have things that when you're small, when you have a core group of people, and it's exactly like Alan said, you don't necessarily need them until you hit a tipping point. And unfortunately, we did that nice steady growth for a little while, and then it kind of went like that. So we doubled and then tripled in size very quickly, and having not the amount of processes that we should have going forward when we started that growth thing was really ugly for about a year and a half. So yes, we have them. Yes, we're now refining them. Yes, we're adding more. I mean, we're in a different scenario where I have service managers, I have operations directors, I have things in place where when you start that scaling process, I mean, you go from a CEO and a CTO and a head technician, where was three of us. It was a core group of folks. And then as you start building out around that, your org chart starts to change and the hats that you're wearing starts to change and the processes start to change because you have to delegate to other people and who's doing what and how they're doing it. And you have to release not everyone's going to do it exactly the same way as you do it, which is very, very difficult. But as long as, and we did something, we call it a playbook, right? So every service ticket has a playbook to it. It's all going to be different in the process, but the playbook is the same. It all starts with a phone call. It ends with a closed ticket, right? So that playbook is exactly the same. So we started with that process and then okay, well, this is a repeatable thing. Now we're going to make the actual process for that. So yes, you start big and then you go down through the funnel and just keep refining the pieces as you go. So I hope that answered your question. I think it did. It was a long answer.
Well, it does make me wonder. I mean, are there because it so happens we have a process expert on the line. Are there pain points that you've run into or
No, there's not a single one.
Sailing all the way.
Yeah, it's perfect. It's great. No, there are, like I said, so marketing to sales, right? Because this is the one that I'm dealing with right now. And I can tell you exactly what my pain points are because I was talking with somebody literally earlier today about what those exact pain points were. And they were, what do I choose here? Do I use, like, we have HubSpot, right? But we're looking at Salesforce. Maybe there's something else. Is there something in there? Like, what tool should I really be using to follow all of this stuff and make sure that the actions are happening when they should be? And can I set up the exact spots inside of there where I want these processes to happen, not happen based on a metric, right? So that's a pain point for me, figuring out what those actually are. I want to take off the marketing hat, right, and move it to somebody else. So that's a pain point for me. And where do I figure out in the process where that should happen, what that looks like? Who does that go to? Do I hire? Do I outsource? What does that look like? And those are it's all part of that process, figuring out when this stuff happens. And then having the voice of reason somewhere else because somebody needs to talk me down off the ledge half the time. But that's some of the pain points that happen as you go through this process. And especially if you're dealing with other folks. So we have, the sales team there like, okay, guys, I can see where when this lead score tips over to a 4 or a 5, I actually need you to make a phone call or do an outreach or an email or whatever. But not knowing where that happens for them in their process is very frustrating. So yes, there are a lot of pain points just in there. And that's just one process.
A small tangent based on this though, but the beauty of all these things is Don, I assume because you have these processes, you're not yelling at salespeople and marketing people, right? You guys are instead tackling this problem on a process where we are working together to make this as smooth for the entire team as possible. And to me, that's the largest benefit of process, is now we're working toward a system versus against or at each other.
Exactly. So there's no fight, right? There's no fight between sales and marketing. That's not the issue. We recognize that a thing is broken and it needs to get fixed, and it's the same thing whether it's in sales, whether it's in service, wherever that is. So if you have an issue in sales and in service, and you can see that this particular process is broken in some way, shape, or form, we know this process is repeatable. So why are we not? Let me put an exact context to this because we have one and we saw it the other day, right? We had an issue where we had a problem that was happening and we saw it over multiple tickets. No one actually addressed the actual issue that was going on, but in ticket review, we could see it. So how do we address that particular process? Did the person do something wrong? Absolutely not. They did exactly what they were supposed to do based on the playbook to work the ticket, based on the process to do the ticket. But the background is that there was still something going on and they weren't catching it because we could see it over multiple different clients, multiple different things, right? So that type of thing, so whose job is it to catch that, right? So that goes up to the service manager. That's the process for him. So it was just a broken process there, and we fixed that one the other day. And it was just a tiny one, but it's one that can lead to a big issue.
I want to follow up on something you said before, Alan, because you were saying, you don't want to be, you don't need to be the process czar, but it does kind of make me wonder. You invest time in creating the processes, you invest time in teaching people what the processes are. How do you ensure? How far should you go to ensure that people are actually utilizing the processes?
Especially because I deal with so many clients who are working on this via change, right? So this is not just working with people who already have a culture of process. These people are trying to introduce it. So because of that, I'm not as draconian as you might, as people tend to want to be. Like, okay, today we're black, yesterday we were white. It's, hey, look, these processes are designed to get results that we were not getting before, which is why we're spending the time to do them. And if I'm getting results, that's the most important thing. And people like to challenge me on this, and I don't mind being wrong, but I find that allowing people to color outside the lines a little bit is okay. And I also find that almost anybody who doesn't follow the process doesn't get the results in the end. I've definitely seen a couple of exceptions where people were set up for failure at later steps, but you can get closer to process over time and it becomes more natural, but I'm frequently introducing it. So I have to give them some wiggle room not to want to curl up in a ball and roll away.
So I like the fact that you use the word change, because change management is hard, especially in some organizations. What's the best way to tackle that change management? Is it just having the conversation of, hey, we're introducing process procedures, that kind of thing, or we're just adjusting things slowly over time? I mean, what's the best language to be using with your folks internally to handle that change management?
It can depend on culture, but yes, change fatigue is definitely real. And I do coach them ahead of time that we're making these changes, but I try to help them envision their end results. Even when we do the accountability chart exercise, people start freaking out because like, oh my gosh, there's all these different things to do, all these responsibilities. But when we're done assigning roles and tasks, they actually realize they've been trying to do too many things. They've been cleaning up behind somebody else's mess. Not that they did a bad job, but the process wasn't clear on which parts are done when. And it actually becomes less work for them to follow process, even though it's a new habit, which is where the change fatigue is picking up new habits. It comes up easier for them. I tend to take a bite-sized approach. I have this really terrible visual that I like to draw. I call it the quantum donut theory. I remember this from the movie Quantum Leap. the TV show, you have a nucleus of an atom and you have these electrons in an orbit. And for an electron to change orbit is a really big freaking deal, like infinite energy, and that's called a quantum leap. I don't believe in quantum leaps. What I do instead is I introduce Homer Simpson to this donut we just drew, and you take a big bite out of it at a time. One little bite, one little bite, one little bite. And suddenly, you take enough bites, it's a small orbit change to get to the end result instead of this big quantum leap. So forgive me for mixing a quantum leap and Homer Simpson, but it works for me.
I think Ziggy and Homer would get along quite well, don't you?
Absolutely.
And I do like my quantum donuts with frosting. Those are the best ways to have them. So one last question I think we have time for, and then we'll let you get back onto your awesome, joyous honeymoon over there in an area where the weather is probably much better than where I'm at. All of this stuff to process is good, and process is you want to have for repeatable actions as much as possible. But as MSPs grow and scale, there's a chapter in the book that talks about automation, and I think that's where you want to eventually have process lead to is things that are automatable. Talk about that just a little bit.
Automation is definitely the penultimate, the tip of the iceberg. And there's this really cool video on YouTube a long time ago, actually, where a Roomba is automatically vacuuming the house. And what they didn't anticipate is that a dog did his business on the floor, and the Roomba automated that too, spread it everywhere. And I think that speaks to the power of process. But even as a programmer or anybody who's trying to produce a consistent result, you have to have a consistent path and consistent data points. I don't know how you do that without a process. Now, perhaps your process is ingrained in your head and you don't have to have it in writing, and that can be okay. But I just, maybe it's old school thinking because automation used to be so expensive. I did paper tickets first, and I only printed 100 of them. When I ran out of 100, I modified all the things that I learned, and I made the next batch. Before I went to an Access database, before I went to Autotask, before I went to ConnectWise. It was always a process-based approach. So I don't know how you can do a great job of automation if you haven't written down and thought out all the steps ahead of time to make it right. It's also proof of concept. Prove that these series of steps works, then automate it. Even those technical SOPs, we had steps 1 through 10, and we handed it to at the time, our automate guy, and he'd go, "Oh, 1 through 5, I can write a script for." And so now step 1 was apply a script, and then we started at step 5, do this. And that's how I see written process leading toward automation.
And that seems very important for MSPs who want to grow and continue to scale in an efficient way, is to get those processes down and to get, like you said, those things that can be automated.
And their temptation is to script first because it's cool. and it's fun, or it's in their wheelhouse, and they end up scripting something, but maybe they haven't processed their working tickets, or maybe they didn't think it all the way through yet, and they have to do a lot of trial and error versus getting the process down first.
Well, and there's an art to knowing when to deviate from the process, right? To make it go better, or to accommodate a client, or whatever the situation is at the time. So teaching somebody to know when to deviate is very difficult too.
Yeah, there's actually, in my opinion, there's 3 layers of processes. Your processes are the bottom layer. At the top level, you have your core values, which you should also be talking about. And to me, if you deviate from an SOP, but you followed the core values and that was the reason you did it, we're probably okay. And then I have some middleware called ways to succeed. It's basically, depending on your culture, 9 to 12 specific things we'd like you to do always, and how they relate to core values. So little things like, if it's not in your PSA, it didn't happen. We actually, write that in a paragraph about how it relates to our core values. So we always have this overarching principle on when to override your process.
Fascinating stuff. And Alan, I want to thank you so much. I think for anybody who wants to learn more about this topic, there's a place you can go. It is this book right here, Process and the P Word, which is also process as it happens to be. Alan, where can people get this book?
It's on Amazon and Audible. It's my voice on there. I just had a good friend of mine who knows not a lick of what I do, which is like, I like your voice, I'm going to buy the audiobook. I don't know how I feel about that. It sounds a little creepy to me. You can do it there, or you can also find out more on our website, eurecaprocess.com.
Yeah, and for those who wanted to work with you or reach out with you, where else is there a way that they can contact you?
Yep, easiest way is eurekaprocess.com.
Awesome. Well, Alan, thank you so much for coming on. It's great to see you again. And interestingly enough, you're still in a Hawaiian shirt, just without the yellow jacket. So I think every time I've seen you, it's been in a yellow or in some kind of Hawaiian shirt, because he was a part of our Survivor panel last year. So that was a lot of fun.
Mandatory dress code.
It was a lot of fun. So Alan, great to see you. Can't wait to have you back to talk about this and other topics down the road.
Thank you, everyone. A pleasure getting to meet you, Dawn.
Hey, it's nice to meet you too.
And with that, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to be still with Dawn Sizer on the other side. We're going to break down the show, have a little bit of fun. You never know what we're going to do. So that's why you got to stick around, and we'll be back in just a moment. Stay tuned. And we are now back with part 3 of this episode. Rich, that was a great interview. Dawn, great insights, great questions. Alan is certainly a very fascinating guy with a very, very interesting history and kind of how he got where he is. And it is a good book. I really do recommend it. I read it. It's a pretty fast read. It doesn't waste your time. It gets right to the point on all of the stuff. He even got Carl Palachuk to write his forward. That's always good to read something new from Carl. And there's no shortage of things to read from Carl, because that guy writes a ton. But it was good. Dawn, I'll start with you. Any takeaways, anything that you got out of that interview that you want to highlight?
So I think it's really smart that he said the first thing to focus on is that SOP process, right? What does your SOP structure look like? I think that's extremely important, because it's like everything else. I mean, you can't build a house without having the plans to build it, right? So why structure your SOPs differently in different ways? If you have that structure down, I think that's really, really smart.
Absolutely, for sure. Rich, any highlights that you want to point out?
I will just say again how grateful we are that he took time away from his honeymoon basically to join us and share his expertise here. I'll toss out a little known fact. You mentioned Carl Palachuk. Like, we know a lot of really very, very smart, talented MSP consultants. I'm pretty sure Alan is the only one I'm aware of who has an IMDb listing, and I'll leave it at that. Look it up. He's actually in IMDb.
Yeah, he is. When he told us that, we did go look it up, and that was certainly interesting as well. Alan is I really, really do recommend the book. Alan's a fascinating guy, and you should consider reaching out and working with him, and checking out that book. So big thanks to Alan. First time we've ever had a honeymooner on the show as well. So it's always nice to have these firsts. So folks, we're gonna move on. We're gonna have have a little bit of fun with Dawn. This is her first time on the show, so she has never played our 5 questions game, because we've had a lot of repeat guest hosts, and we've kind of made up with some other games recently to kind of play with them to have fun. But this is your first time, so we can go to the original, the classic 5 questions. For those who are new to the show, the way this works is Rich and I will ask Dawn 5 different questions, definitely on topic, sometimes strange, just to learn a little bit more about her. But Dawn, it's nothing embarrassing, no gotchas or anything like that, just to learn a little bit more about you and what makes you tick. So get ready for that. Rich, I will send question number 1 to you.
So, Don, you said one of the perks of being on advisory boards is they will fly you to warm places now and again. That implies to me you may enjoy a nice beach now and again. Do you have a favorite beach anywhere?
Strangely, my favorite beach is not a warm one. So I was in Scotland a couple years ago, and that was probably one of my favorite things, to be able to walk outside of Inverness and watch the dolphins playing out in the water. It was beautiful. It was right at the time of gloaming, which is just before the sun sets. You can see like the shapes of the dolphins out in there. It was just gorgeous. It was really neat. It was a neat experience.
Very interesting. I'm going to go the food route, Rich, because I know you usually are the one to talk about food, but whenever I meet somebody from Pennsylvania, I know that Philly cheesesteaks are a very important part of their life. So which is the correct Philly cheesesteak? What's the best Philly cheesesteak?
So this is something that George Bardisi should share with you, because believe it, I have celiac disease and I can't have them. So
no.
Yeah, so I can't actually have any of the bread or anything. And there's something to be said, like just eating meat and cheese isn't all that exciting. You have to have the bread to soak up all the other stuff. So ask George from BVoIP. That's a great question for him.
So we will have to answer. So does your husband consume Philly cheesesteaks? Does he have a favorite?
He does not. So I would say probably our favorite type of thing is not a Philly cheesesteak, unfortunately.
Okay, so I'll change my question then. So my I get to do that because I'm the host and I can do whatever I want.
Yeah, it's totally fine.
So in that case, what is your favorite Philadelphia or favorite Pennsylvania food that's popular in Pennsylvania?
Pie. Pie is awesome. I mean, does anyone not like pie? I mean, realistically, right?
So there's a kind of pie that I think is a PA is a shoe fly pie.
So there's shoe fly pie. There's all kinds of like mincemeat kinds of things, but the good standard like apples. Apples are a huge thing, and they're grown really heavily right in the area that we are. So apple pie is probably one of my favorites.
Apple pie. It doesn't get any better than apple pie.
It really doesn't. It really doesn't.
All right, Rich, question number, I guess it's technically 4, but I'm going to call it question number 3 to you.
Yeah, I'm not sure I could ever fully trust someone who didn't like pie. Just putting that out there right now. So if I was to ask this question of George at Bevo, his answer would be the Philadelphia Eagles. But what is your favorite sports team?
Green Bay Packers.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah. So my family is actually from upper Michigan. My mom's family is from upper Michigan. My husband's family is from Wisconsin, right outside of Green Bay. So we're Packers fans. We're cheeseheads. Yep.
Yeah, and it's funny. I happen to live in that area, that little slice of the country between like right northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin. Right. So it is a very sticky thing around here that is very contentious, because you get Bears fans and you get Packers fans, and they're all kind of in this area, and it can get pretty rough, especially here. Like I'm not a big football fan. Like I would say, like I grew up a little closer to the city, so I would say I'm a Bears fan, but my son's a Packers fan. So it's like it's kind of weird, how
yeah. So I live in central Pennsylvania, and I've got Philadelphia on one side and Pittsburgh on the other. Yeah, it gets ugly sometimes.
But you stay out of it because I
stay out of it because I'm a cheesehead.
Yeah. Once you go Green Bay, you never go back.
You don't.
Okay, so I'll ask question number 4. Have you been to Lambeau Field? Have you ever had a chance to see a Green Bay Packers game in person?
So I've been to Lambeau Field as a child. I haven't been back, and I've never actually seen a game, but I was at the field. So yes, but not in a really fun, freezing cold kind of way.
It can get cold up there.
It's a little chilly.
Sure. Yeah, that is for sure. All right, Rich, question number 5 to you.
Well, let's inject a tech angle here. What was your first computer?
Oh, a Trash 80 back in school. Beyond that, it was a Commodore 64 that I purchased. Actually, my grandparents purchased for me. So
the TRS 80. Yeah, I remember those. I remember the Commodore. So I'm going to throw a quick question, number 6, because I can do that. What was something that you programmed on your Commodore 64? What did you use your Commodore 64 for?
Mostly writing papers, but I think we all remember the Oregon Trail, right? We all played that on the old Apple IIe's, I think, back in school, right? But we all programmed Hello World in BASIC and that sort of thing. So I think that's probably the first things that we did.
Very cool. Very interesting stuff. Well, thanks for playing along.
Sure.
I always like to learn a little bit more about our guests, and I know our listeners do, and they always like this segment. So thanks for doing that. We won't say goodbye to you yet, though. But first, Rich, why don't you tell us what we might be? I know we don't have any case you missed it this week, so tell us what we might be seeing in the near future.
Well, looking ahead to what's coming up next week, there are some news items that will be coming that we can't actually speak about right now. But one thing happening next week for the first time, I believe, since 2019, since the pandemic, is True Methods. It's holding its Schnizzfest conference. This is their sort of user conference for MSP consultees of Gary Pica. They're going to be in Phoenix, speaking of warm places, and meeting face-to-face for the first time. The thing I don't know, and I'm wondering about, is if our buddy Joel Zatespinner maybe is going to be there. He might or might not. Unfortunately, I will not. But just good to see those folks getting together back in person again.
And if folks, if you're there and Joel is there, say hello, tell him you listen to the show, and he'll give you a great big Joel hug or something. I don't know what he does, but definitely make sure you say hello to him and have a good conversation. Great show. Dawn Sizer, CEO of I haven't, hold on, it's in the tip of my tongue here. Sorry, Third Element Consulting. I knew it was third something. So Dawn, I really appreciate you coming on. I hope you had a good time.
Yeah, it was my pleasure, guys. Thanks so much for having me.
Lots of fun. Great having you back. I hope you come back and join us again sometime down the road. For those who wanted to connect with you, learn more about Third Element Consulting, work with you, where can they go? How can they find you?
LinkedIn is a fantastic place. Just hook up with me there on LinkedIn, send me a message, send me a carrier pigeon, whatever, and we'll schedule some time and do that.
That would be awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on. And folks, the best way to stay on top of things going on here in the channel and the tech industry is to go to channelpronetwork.com, set it as your homepage, go there each and every day. There you're going to find the latest news, articles, white papers, resources, downloads, all kinds of good stuff, podcasts to help you stay on top of what's going on in this crazy industry, and also lots of things to help you make your business better, improve hiring and improve business accounting, advice, sometimes all kinds of stuff from written by experts all across the industry. So you want to check that out. Of course, also subscribe to the ChannelPro Weekly podcast everywhere podcasts are found. Go find whatever your favorite one is, and we should be in there. If you do like to watch, we're on YouTube. You can hit the like button, you can hit the subscribe, hit the bell. There's a lot of buttons on YouTube. You just got to press them all and hope that the site doesn't explode. So do that as well. And with that, we will. Big thanks to John Sizer for coming on. Big thanks to Alan Edwards for joining us, and we will see everyone in episode number 254 next week. See you then.